Hello and welcome back to the Chargers Check-In. My name is Cecilia Winters, and we are going to check in with the entire AFC West. We are going to grade how each team has done before and take a look at their season outlook going forward. We're going to start with the team who has performed the worst, which is, as God intended, the Las Vegas Raiders. So to start out with, the first thing you need to look at is their quarterback play. And in my opinion, Geno Smith just has not been good enough. And this is kind of something you could see coming. I mean, there's a reason that it only cost them a third-round pick to get him. You know, at the time, it was like, well, it's a good value trade, but is that good enough to elevate what has consistently been a struggling offense? And it's worth noting, it's not like he's throwing to nobodies, right? I mean, Brock Bowers broke the rookie reception record with Aiden O'Connell, right? So clearly he is very capable. I know he started off with some injuries, but you know, there's also Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker. I mean, he has guys to throw to who can make stuff happen after the catch, who can make stuff happen downfield, and he has just been inadequate. Now, his offensive line has not played well in front of him, and he hasn't even played to their level. You know, there are definitely, throughout the league, some interceptions where you go, yeah, but he had to throw that. What are you going to do? And Geno's had a couple of those, but he has also just made some really bad decisions. You know, he, against the Bears, threw two of the exact same interceptions, where one of them you go, okay, he made a bad decision, is what it is. The second one you go, okay, is he going to make any adjustments, or is this just it? And I think this is it. I think this is as good as they can get out of Geno Smith.
At what point where it becomes a serious concern? I know you guys, Geno's good at bouncing back.
I don't know that gauge. I don't know what you're asking me. I don't know what that gauge would be. At what point? I don't have a gauge for that.
He might be able to turn it around, but so far in the first quarter, he has struggled a lot. And the fact of the matter is, Max Crosby is playing insane. Okay, and you have this window of time where you have Max Crosby in his prime, just absolutely wrecking games. Against the Bears recently, it felt like Max Crosby was single-handedly keeping Vegas in that game. I mean, he had no business getting all of those pass breakups and making that big of an impact. He's going back and forth with Caleb Williams, and I don't know, I look at that and I go, I know he's been really loyal to this organization, but I don't think this organization has deserved it. And I think about how he and the other players, after Josh McDaniels was such a failure of a coach, they called for Antonio Pierce to get the head coaching job, and how the Raiders should have responded, the organization, ownership should have responded was, we get that you feel this way, we'll promote him to defensive coordinator, he's going to be a really important part of this coaching staff, but we're going to go get a good head coach. Because if you think about there were so many great head coaching candidates, but they just kind of kicked the can down the road. And I think that is a strong reflection of the weakness of their ownership. You should never let players choose their coach. That dynamic will be completely backwards, in my opinion. And after the Raiders beat the Chargers 63-21 or something, I remember thinking, like, this could end up being the best thing to happen for the Chargers. And it was. But on top of that, it was also the worst thing to happen for the Raiders because they hired the wrong guy. And so now you have Pete Carroll, who comes in with a tremendous amount of experience, tremendous amount of credibility, huge figure in the history of football. But now he is a year behind Jim Harbaugh and Sean Payton in their rebuilds, which is why he finds himself behind. At least partially why. Now, as far as everything else on the Raiders defense, they don't look great. Their secondary seems confused and seems to give up a couple plays that they really shouldn't because of miscommunication in almost every game. They definitely had a moment like that against the Bears where you literally have these guys look at each other and then both run forward and leave a guy in single coverage downfield. And Caleb Williams took advantage of that. And I think we're going to see other quarterbacks in the future take advantage of that as well. So far, the Raiders, their only win is against the Patriots. I hate to say it, but they're kind of holding this division back. You know, you have this division with coaching legends and strong quarterback play, and then you have the Raiders dragging them down. I mean, the AFC West should be considered one of the best divisions in football, the best, really, but they can't compete with the NFC North because the Raiders are just dragging them down. And so, you know, it's disappointing to see from that perspective. But at the same time, as a Chargers fan, I admit I do love to see it, as do Broncos fans, as do Chiefs fans. Now, there is some good news there, too. Ashton Jeanty looks great. He has had some rookie mistakes. His fumble, I think that was entirely on him, but he's also had some really explosive runs. His motor is crazy. He is going to be fine. We'll see how long he's with Chip Kelly over there. That's going to be interesting. But I think that they have had 2 really good first-round picks in a row. That being said, they're 1-3. I'm going to give them a D grade for this first quarter. It's just been really ugly. And, they came in with a lot of juice. They seem to bring a lot of energy to every game, but they are just consistently not getting it done. Losing a lot of close games, that's going to wear on their morale. As for their next quarter predictions, the unfortunate thing is I think most likely they're going to go 1-3 in the next quarter. They're facing the Colts, the Titans, the Chiefs, the Jags. I don't see them beating the Chiefs, though I think it'll be a tough game because these division games often are. I'm going to go ahead and predict that they beat the Titans. I think the Titans are far and away the worst team in football right now. They're in shambles in every sense. I don't think the Colts are amazing, but I think that they're a solid team, and I don't see the Raiders beating that. That'll be interesting to see. And as much as the Jags have had their struggles, I think they just have too much going. Maybe against my better judgment. I believe in Liam Cohen, and I don't know. I think the Raiders have a tough stretch ahead, but I think for most teams, you'd go, it's kind of a tough stretch. Not really, though. You know what I mean? I think an average team could expect to go, 2-2 or 3-1 in this stretch, but not the Raiders. So while I don't have faith in them in the second quarter of this season, looking forward, into next year, they definitely have a strong opportunity to make a big splash. They, once again, are going to be looking for a quarterback. I don't know how many years in a row they are going to be doing that, but at some point, they're going to have to settle something down. And I think this quarterback draft is going to end up being good. You have Mendoza out of Indiana, you have Sellers. I think some of the Manning hype is dying down. We'll see if he ends up declaring. Some teams are really going to like Drew Aller. I mean, there's a lot of options here. Kaliak Manis, he just had a rough game, but he's looking way better than he did last year. They're going to have options, and at some point, they're going to have to take it. We will see if they do poorly enough to get their pick on quarterbacks, but I think Pete Carroll in his second year is going to succeed a lot more than he did this year. It feels inevitable to me. That being said, right now they're playing less than the sum of their parts, which is not a good look on Pete Carroll, on Chip Kelly, on the whole coaching staff, but they have all of their draft picks for next year. They absolutely have an opportunity to turn it. Their first round draft pick this year and last year, that's Brock Bowers and Ashton Jeanty, they both look great. Some of those later picks need to start hitting. We haven't really seen their draft picks in the last couple of years make much of a difference, and that has to change going forward. They have to develop these pieces because otherwise they're in the AFC West. They're not going to be able to keep up with 3 competitive teams, especially the Chiefs. That being said, their key to success in the next quarter is going to be get the ball in someone's hands other than Geno Smith. That could be handing it off to Jeanty or throwing it to Jeanty in quick design plays as fast as possible, as often as possible. It could also mean, getting Brock Bowers involved in these design him open. Don't just depend on him being the second look down the field. Get the ball out of Geno Smith's hands. That's fewer opportunities for interceptions. Run the ball, win the time of possession game, and let Max Crosby just go out there and cook these guys because he's doing great in run defense, excellent in pass. I don't have to tell you who Max Crosby is. But man, Geno Smith is holding these guys back. Up next, we have the Denver Broncos, who are ending this quarter with 2 wins and 2 losses. And their next quarter, they are playing the Eagles, the Jets, the Giants, and the Cowboys, which that's 2 pretty tough teams, and then 2 teams on the easier side, but we'll see where the Giants end up once Jackson Dart has gotten a little more comfortable. To me, the Broncos are the most hot and cold team in the AFC West, maybe even in the AFC. One week, they look like absolute contenders. It's like, oh yeah, no question, this is going to be a deep playoff run. And then the next week, you're like, who are these guys? And everything falls apart. And I think that starts with Bo Nix. He, this year, seems to want to play more loose. It seems like that's something that Sean Payton's been trying to draw out of him. Be willing to take chances, sling the ball downfield, and just go out there and play hard. Play with faith in yourself and your receivers. And it's kind of backfiring a little bit. The Titans only have 3 interceptions on the year, and 2 of them came against Bo Nix. That's not great. Titans defense is bottom 5 defense. So it's just one of those things where it's like, that isn't the game you need to take a risk on. I love how J.K. Dobbins is playing. He's a great guy, great player, clearly great for the locker room. He just has that positive, infectious energy. I was pretty sad when the Chargers didn't re-sign him, although obviously, they got Hampton. I understand it. I get it. But he is at times keeping them in the game. And for a team with a really good offensive line, that's not really what you want to see. I think depending on your running back is something you can do when, your offensive line is struggling, or if you're like the Chargers and you need to protect the quarterback better. But for them, it's just like J.K. Dobbins is making stuff happen, making guys miss down the field. He gets a couple explosive runs every game. And Bo Nix isn't really backing him up in that sense with his arm or his legs. He always has a couple good scrambles, but he really needs to hit some of those deep passes. We all saw him miss those against the Chargers, and you're gonna miss one or two of those, but some of those he's missing by a lot, and that's just not gonna work for them going forward. To me, this is a very high ceiling, low floor kind of team. And a lot of teams are like that. And you can do that in the first quarter, but things really have to settle down in this second quarter for them to have a real playoff shot. I do think that they are playoff contenders, at least wild card contenders. I don't know if I see them overtaking the Chiefs, but we will see. Obviously, most recently, they beat a Bengals team, which is good to see because you want to beat bad teams very decisively. You don't want to beat bad teams, in really close games like they have in the past. So this was their first real decisive win because they lost close game after close game in the first quarter. And because of that, I am going to give them a C+, not at all how they wanted to start the season, but at the same time, they're not the Raiders, right? They're 2-2. They have a decisive win. They're losing close games. It's at least competitive. I mean, it's come down to field goals most of the time. But I think Bo Nix just needs to play better. I mean, their defensive line is playing great. They are a leader in the NFL in terms of sacks. They have such a good offensive line, and so many pieces around them are working. Once Bo Nix kind of gets it together, and I think that he will, I think he's proven that that's something he can do, I think they're going to be in a good position. The question is, how many did they lose in the meantime? So looking forward at their second quarter, they're playing the Eagles, Jets, Giants, and Cowboys. That could end up being a tough stretch. The Eagles can be tough. The Cowboys can be tough. We will see what the Giants are, like I said. They absolutely need to beat the Jets. They can't let that be close. But I think my next quarter win prediction for them is going to be 2-2. I don't know if they're going to drop it to the Giants or to the Cowboys, but I do think they're going to drop it to one of them. Dak Prescott looks really good, even without, some of their key players trading away Micah Parsons for some god-awful reason. They still look competitive to me. I mean, putting up 40 points against the Packers, that's kind of a win for them. I looked at that game as the Packers lost and the Cowboys won, effectively. Their key to success in this next quarter is going to be Bo Nix cannot afford to throw as many interceptions as he does. Sometimes he just needs to take the L and throw the ball away. That's a common mistake that young quarterbacks make. They hold on to the ball too long. They're determined to make that play downfield. They're so hungry for it that they don't really know when to just take the L. And in the next couple weeks, they're playing some weak defenses. They have an opportunity to kind of figure it out on offense, so that's what they need to do. So the Raiders get a D, the Broncos get a C+. How about the Chiefs? They're 2-2 after the first quarter. Obviously, they lost that opener against the Chargers in Brazil, and I think that really hurt them because I think the Chargers are going to be the toughest competition in the AFC West. Xavier Worthy is back, and they look like a different team. I'm sure you all saw that Ravens game, and the Ravens defense is obviously bad, but Xavier Worthy, he adds a whole new dimension to this Chiefs offense just by himself, and it begs the question, imagine when Rashee Rice is back. What is that going to look like? That's going to be really hard for teams to prepare against. The run game looked a lot better. Pacheco actually kind of showed up, which they've been waiting on. Their offensive line is looking better than I think a lot of people expected. Obviously, when you lose to the Eagles, everyone is going to be looking at the offensive line, but to me, that's more of a reflection of the Eagles than anything else. The offensive line for the Chiefs just wasn't good enough for a Super Bowl. That doesn't mean that it isn't good enough for them to become the leader in the AFC West, especially with the Chargers' issues at offensive line, which we will get into. But to me, I think the biggest deal for the Chiefs is that their defense is finally clicking. It didn't turn out great against the Chargers. The offensive line was able to pick up on all of the stunts and games and really complicated things that the Chiefs' defensive line was doing, and they were able to negate a lot of what Chris Jones does, and I don't think teams are able to do that anymore. The Chiefs are getting it together, and their offense and defense are finally clicking at once. They will be okay. But they still dropped 2 teams in their first quarter, so they're 2-2. So overall, I'm going to give them a B-. They really should have been able to beat the Chargers. Now, I know your thought is Xavier Worthy was out, Rashee Rice was out, and to that I say both of those player absences were on the Chiefs. Now, usually when a player is out, you go, that's bad luck, it's unfortunate, but for the Chiefs, Xavier Worthy was knocked out of the game by Travis Kelce. That's a miscommunication on them. I don't know whose fault that is. I don't know where that falls apart. It looked a lot like Travis Kelce's fault, but that isn't, just an unfortunate, ligament tear in open field or just a bad hit from an opponent. That just happened because they ran into each other. So it's unfortunate, but it is on them. And as for Rashee Rice, look, he's going to be a good player, but they knew who he was when they drafted him. There were consistent reports that he had problems off the field, that he was a behavior problem guy, that he, wasn't a great teammate. I remember reading a scouting report on him because, I was looking at who should the Chargers pick, and one of the scouting reports was like, yeah, he'll be a great player, but he's just not a good guy, which is not, obviously that's not what you want to read about a player, and I heard Andy Reid making a joke about his speeding incident. I'm like, Andy Reid, you are a legendary coach, but are you the guy to joke about this? Like, I don't know. I just think it's worth noting that those are both self-inflicted issues, but they have an upward trajectory, right? They're going to get Rashee Rice back. Xavier Worthy looks great. Their run game is starting to click. I still don't think it's understandable that they lost to the Chargers. The Chargers' best players played toward their ceiling. The Chiefs' best player played toward their floor. I hope that makes sense. A lot of guys just didn't have a good game. Now, I think the constant threat of Mahomes scrambling is a huge advantage for them. They have to keep leaning into that. I think that they're going to have a lot easier time doing that now that Xavier Worthy is back, because that can, really stretch the field, force defenses to respect the deep ball. Some minor concerns about Harrison Butker. He didn't look great. I think he has 2 missed field goals already. He tends to get those really deep ones, and then he's a little iffy on the closer ones, which isn't ideal. I wouldn't say it's a concern yet, really. Just something to keep an eye on. And in my opinion, they will absolutely contend for the division. A lot of people were ready to completely dismiss them after they started 0-2. They started with 2 really tough games. I think that has more to do with luck of scheduling than anything else. We will see. Their keys to success in the next quarter will be to run the ball and keep defenses at a disadvantage down the field. And that looks like Mahomes scrambling, and Isaiah Pacheco has to get going and keep going. In the next 4 games, they play the Jags, the Lions, the Raiders, and the Commanders. My prediction for them in the next quarter is that they're going to go 3-1. I think the Lions have the best shot at beating them, and they're playing the Jags, the Raiders, and Commanders otherwise. There's a world in which the Commanders or Jaguars really show out. I don't think the Raiders are gonna. I know it's a division game, and those tend to be tough, but it's at Arrowhead. The Raiders just, I don't know, they don't have it this year. And I think by then they will be beaten down enough that they're not going to believe that they have it either. And finally, we have the 3-1 Chargers. This has been a really exciting start to their season. Obviously, they dropped that terrible game against the Giants, but they started out with 3 division wins. You can't downplay the importance of that in a division with the Broncos and the Chiefs. So you got to give them credit for that. So far, Justin Herbert has had 3 excellent games and 1 bad game. That's not a bad ratio to me. That is good enough that they can go as far as the rest of the team will take him. It's also worth noting, Herbert is really only bad when everything else around him is bad. If the offensive line plays bad, but his receivers are on, Herbert is on. If the offensive line is bad and the receivers are bad, that's when Herbert has bad games. And so the blame is not solely on Herbert for this. I mean, honestly, he's been running for his life lately, which we will get into. And even then, sometimes when the team around him is collapsing, even then, sometimes he's able to pull it off. It's worth noting, he only does poorly after he's taken like 10, 12 hits in a game. That is going to be the key for the Chargers moving forward, everything to do with their offensive line. And I am going to make a video dedicated to the offensive line and what they can do about all the injuries, all the situations there. But for now, I'm just going to say they got to get the ball in Amarian Hampton's hands. Now, Hampton had a slow start to the season, didn't get many touches. And then when Najee Harris went down, Chargers had no choice. They had to give it to the rookie. And he has looked excellent ever since. He had an absolute breakout game against the Giants. You know, when everything around him was going badly, Amarian Hampton was still cooking. And he only got, I think it was 12 design touches. I think he had 15 carries in total. That number needs to go way up moving forward, and I think it will. I think he proved that he really is that guy. Jim Harbaugh spoke really highly of him in the post-game press conference, and that first round pick is looking like he's going to fill out that value, and that's something you want to see. On a Harbaugh team, you have to be able to run. On a Greg Roman team, you have to be able to run. And it looks like they'll be able to. On the defensive side, their defense has been playing lights out until they got against the Giants. I don't know what happened there. The Giants had what looked to me like a really simple game plan. It was just RPOs and designed runs for Jackson Dart and him looking at his first read and then deciding to run. To me, there was a simple solution to that. Put Deion Henley as a QB spy. It frustrates me that they didn't really do that until the second half, and even then they didn't stick to it. That is entirely on Jesse Minter, to me at least, because there were still players who had good games. I mean, Thule had the game of his life, is how I said it in my last video. That's been good to see. Before anyone says, like, oh, they lost to the Giants, that means they should get a C-, that means they're not good. I want to list just some of the players who have been out for part of this first quarter, okay? Khalil Mack, Mekhi Becton, Joe Alt, Elijah Molden, Rashawn Slater, Najee Harris, Denzel Perryman, Josh Harris, Junior Colson, Will Dissly, Darius Davis, and plus some second and third string players whose names you don't know, but are still relevant to the depth chart. To me, this is a tremendous amount to overcome. A tremendous amount. I mean, Thule has been working across from Caleb Murphy, who is a UDFA, who, hey, he's had a few splash plays. That's great. He is not consistently a good run defender, and he is not consistently getting pressures on the quarterback. Thule is essentially making that happen on his own. And the injuries are concerning moving forward, but I think, you know, when we give them this grade, we're just looking at what did they do this quarter. And I think overall they did really well. They did really well. So I'm going to give them a B+. So they're getting the best grade of the AFC West. They should be 4-0, and it is on them that they are not. They needed to dedicate more resources to protecting Herbert when Joe Alt went down, when, you know, Trey Pipkins has been going in and out of the blue tent, and Bradley Bozeman is Bradley Bozeman. So to me, that's a bit of mismanagement that I hope they can learn from going forward, but we will see. This is, again, a consequence of them not drafting anyone for the offensive line until I think the 6th round last year. To me, that's unacceptable. Drafting Joe Alt was not enough for this group, but what are you going to do? The Chargers have not been winning the field position game, which is very unlike Jim Harbaugh. To me, that is entirely on special teams and special teams coach Ryan Ficken. First of all, Tarheeb Still has been being the returner. Why? Why is Tarheeb Still the returner? Okay, so you don't want to do Ladd because he's a wide receiver and he might end up being really important. Okay, I hear you, but Tarheeb Still is a starting corner, so he's important too. And also, you're not throwing the ball to Ladd anyways. You may as well. I mean, you're throwing it a few times and he's not bringing it in. You may as well use him as a returner. But I understand the hesitation. I understand the logic in not doing that. But if you're not going to do that, I don't think Tarheeb Still should be the next man up. I think maybe Keandre Lambert-Smith, maybe Trey Harris. You know, I didn't love Hassan Haskins, but we can't afford to have Tarheeb Still get hurt. We really can't. You know, as much as I don't like Hassan Haskins out there, I think he would have known to fair catch it last game, right? I mean, Tarheeb Still, he's trying to run it back. It's fine to run it back, run straight north and south. Hey, I'm going to quickly get 5 yards. That's fine. But that's not what he did. He was moving east and west, and it's because he doesn't know what he's doing. And that's not his fault. He's a cornerback. He's not a returner. So to me, that is mismanagement of the returner position, and that has to be better. He also seemed really out of step with the blocking. I don't know what's going on there because I don't think that's been too affected by injuries, but that's going to have to improve. The Chargers cannot keep winning if they're starting every drive at the 10, at the 15, at the 20, and their opponents are starting every drive at the 30, the 35, the 40. And that's what it's felt like through these first few games, especially against the Broncos, whose special teams unit really outplayed the Chargers. And that can't be the case moving forward. J.K. Scott also shanked a punt last game. That was really bad. He is such an up and down player. He'll have the best punt in the league one week, and then the next week, you may as well just put some random skill position player out there. And that's been really disheartening. And I'm curious if that's a position they're going to want to address in the offseason. It's hard because on average, J.K. Scott is really good, but those bad kicks really affect you, and they seem to come later in the game when you need good kicks more. I was so close to giving them an A- grade because, hey, 3-1 and a division sweep. You can't understate the value of that at the beginning of a season. But ultimately, the offensive scheme failed to make up for the really banged up offensive line, and they couldn't protect Herbert. They needed to give Austin Deculus help on the left side, and instead they were giving Trey Pipkins help. That's just not sustainable. Austin Deculus is a player they just traded for. He's a third stringer. Of course he's not going to do very well against Abdul Carter. That's a really obvious play, and so they need to do everything they can next week against the Commanders to protect Justin Herbert, because like I said about the Giants game, the worst thing that could happen isn't a Giants win. It is not a Chargers loss. It's Justin Herbert getting hurt, and they're really lucky that he was only in pain and not injured last week. As for their second quarter, my next quarter prediction is that they're going to go 2-2. They play the Commanders, the Dolphins, the Colts, and the Vikings. I think it's very possible that they lose to the Commanders and the Colts while Joe Alt is out. And it's been confirmed that Joe Alt has had a high ankle sprain. It's very confusing to me what the timeline is. Some people are saying, oh, he'll be back in 3 weeks. Some people are saying he'll be back in 6 weeks or 8 weeks. I'm going to assume between 4 and 6 weeks. I expect him to be put on IR, but we will see. That hasn't come out yet. The injury report hasn't come out yet while I'm recording, but we all definitely need to keep an eye on that. And I know that 2-2 isn't a super optimistic prediction. It still puts the Chargers 2 games ahead of 500, but I really need Greg Roman to prove that he is willing to just hand the ball off to Hampton time and time again and protect Justin Herbert. However that looks like. That could look like anything, but what it can't look like is what it looked like against the Giants. So if he can prove that, maybe that prediction changes. But right now, when you put Scott Matlock one-on-one against an edge rusher, yeah, you need to go into that play understanding that Herbert is going to get hit. Like, that is like 80% likely to me, right? And it's worth mentioning, their defense don't really have many takeaways. They're not winning the turnover differential, and that's something usually the Chargers are a strength at. It was one of their best strengths last year. I think when Elijah Molden comes back, and we're not sure when that is, they'll look better. But for now, I think the keys to the Chargers' success in the next few weeks is to do anything they possibly can to keep Justin Herbert safe, and that starts with running the ball. Obviously, the Commanders have had a decent run defense, but it didn't look that great last week. They have an opportunity here. Marion Hampton's a great runner. Give it to him, put Kamani Vidal in the mix sometimes, put Hassan Haskins in the mix sometimes, and give Herbert a break. He will have an opportunity to get into a rhythm against this Commanders secondary, but that cannot come at the expense of him getting hit. I think he has the space to get into a rhythm without every first down play and every third down play being a pass. I think they can run it on first down. They can run it on those third and short situations, mix the play action in there. I think all of that is going to work together to be effective, and we don't need to put these next few games on Herbert's back. His health matters a lot more than the win-loss record in the next quarter. So just to recap, we got the Chargers with a B+ and a 3-1 record, looking pretty good, but lots of injury problems going into the next quarter. We will see. You have the Chiefs at a B-, 2-2 record, and the next quarter looks pretty good for them. They're definitely on the come up. They're going to give the Chargers a run for the division in the next quarter. We'll see how that plays out, but the Broncos 2-2, getting a C+ on the first quarter, not looking great, but definitely have an opportunity to catch up with the Chargers in the next quarter while Joe Alt is out. And then finally, you have the 1-3 Raiders, which could not happen to a more deserving team, and they get a D because that's what they deserve. So that's going to do it for me. My name is Cecilia with the Chargers Check-In. Thank you so much for watching, and subscribe for more. I'll see you guys.